Welcome back to this casual conversation blog thing that we do. Today we have a special guest with us, our friend and the head of innovation globally for Neota Logic, Jackson Liu. Jackson, welcome to the casual conversation.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's been a couple of weeks since I've seen you. You've just landed back in Australia and you've picked up this really awesome new role at Nyota. I don't know how much is on the wrap still, but would love to hear a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've taken up more of a global innovation role, and I know that the word innovation is quite broad. So in the context of my new role, it's more looking at the company positioning, messaging in the market, a little bit of product marketing, really focusing on the content that we create that goes out into market, and content, from what's on our website to what's done with case studies, webinars, thought leadership materials, and really re-engaging the market on what is Neota Logic. So I think Neota Logic historically, we've been around for a while. I mean, I've been at the company for over 4 years already. The company name, I think, is very well known in the market and among the legal tech circles. I think for us, it's about really trying to make the market understand what we do. So go beyond the name, of course. Having a well-recognized brand is fantastic, but also the dialogue we want to create is not, I know I've heard of your name before, but I don't quite know what you do. Mm-hmm. I want to change that dialogue to, I've heard of your name before, I know exactly what you do. Tell me why we should have Neota Logic being used within our organization.
That's fascinating because Neota is one of the probably most well-known brands for legal technology for lawyers. And this conversation is all about, well, what can technology do to help, and also how do lawyers become better lawyers? And so it's interesting that you say you're trying to advance that sort of branding from we've heard of you to we've heard of you, we know what you do. So let's kind of drill down on that one. How does a no-code, low-code platform help lawyers?
I think two weeks ago, I released a blog, which is my insider guide to picking the right no-code platform. Mm-hmm. And in there, I had a section on this concept of citizen development. And I've had quite a good amount of feedback and also debate on my view on citizen development. And it really goes back to this definition that Gartner gave it. So Gartner gave it a definition which is pretty stock standard, I would say, in terms of what the two words mean. But they finished it off by saying it must be sanctioned by IT. My view is that no-code platforms and even low-code platforms should be business-led purchases because the value is driven by the business. But it should be managed and approved and governed by the IT team. So what I think no-code platform, the real value is in the downstream use of no-code platforms by the business. It's not about bypassing IT. It's about having IT's support and approval to use a platform where you don't have to then go to IT to do certain things, like creating a database, a SQL database, managing it, updating it. You don't need to go to your SQL administrator if the no-code platform allows you to do that. You can create a digital solution without going to your IT team. You can do it yourself within the business. IT is often a very resource restrictive team, and having the ability to do the building, the iterating, the deploying of solutions, being able to really, you know, even create your own database and do things with that without getting IT involved, I think saves the business. And you talk about legal, I like to talk about probably more sort of business, so expanding from legal, just the business in general, being able to do that themselves, I think is where the real value of no code, low code platforms lie.
I want to pick up on a couple of threads there. And the first one is the way you describe a no-code, low-code platform is far broader than what some of the legal texts have kind of pitched it at, right? Like a lot of legal texts go out and say, hey, we can capture your legal expertise, or we can kind of capture these legal processes. And the way you describe it is almost like we are a substitute for programming language. And we enable so much more than just routine capture of processes. What do you think is kind of like the right level of complexity for lawyers or for professionals and for businesses?
My view on no code platforms is that it exists on a spectrum, and it exists on a very wide spectrum. So on one hand, you have, you know, very, I don't want to say simple functionalities, but, you know, functionalities where you build a few forms, you have some very simple logic calculations, and then you build, you know, a solution from that. So that's the one end. On the other end, where, you know, and I have to say this, where Neota sits, and obviously the other platforms also sit, is you can do some pretty advanced things through no code. So, you know, this idea of building, you know, workflow, or automating workflow, automating business processes, multi-step, multi-stage processes that has multiple, you know, functions within that workflow, you know, creating really advanced reasoning. So, you know, for example, Neota has this concept of creating instances, which is an IT language, I believe, but also applying reasoning to individual rows or groups of data in an instance. That's something that you won't find on the other end of the spectrum, for example. You know, creating, updating databases natively within the platform is also something that's quite unique. So what I, you know, if I was a buyer of no-code platforms, the first thing I would, you know, try and think of is, well, do I want a platform or do I want a point solution? And if I want a platform, do I want a platform to solve one specific area, one specific problem that I have? Or do I want a platform that can be used with our other stack of technologies and almost use it as an enterprise grade software? And those are the questions I think, you know, whether you're in legal, whether you're in procurement, whether you are looking at an enterprise grade, you know, software, those are the questions I think you need to start looking at first, and then going into, well, and how you answer those questions will dictate where on that spectrum you're looking at in terms of a no-code platform.
That's super fascinating. Let's explore this one. What is your definition of the difference between no-code and low-code?
So I actually just did an interview with one of now one of my really good friends, and so his view was you either go all in or you don't. And no code is going all in. Low code is you're going kind of halfway in, but you're not going all the way in, because when you buy a low code platform or software, you still kind of need to know a few technical things to be able to really utilize it properly. Whereas if you buy a no code software or platform, you're going all in as a business, so that you are empowered as the business to use it without support from your IT team. Now, this leads on to a very interesting point, in my opinion, which is what is the level of support given to also no code, low code platforms on that spectrum? And I think that's an area which, platforms, vendors in this space don't really talk about a lot. And that's an area which I'm pretty passionate about, because I started at Neota Logic in Melbourne way back when, in the sort of customer experience, customer success role. And my view is that when you have a platform, but especially a no-code platform where you're empowering users to come in and build it without that background, you need to have a really, really good customer success team and support team to be able to take the users through that user journey. And I think user journeys are really important when it comes to no-code platforms. So it's about, it's not just about the tech, how easy it is to use, but it's about guiding them through the build process. We at Neota like the iterative process to building. So this MVP approach and taking them through that. And we've invested quite heavily on Nyota University, and those are the soft areas which I think this market is not focusing a lot of energy on, and it's always focused on the tech side. But I think the soft side is also almost as important as the tech side as well.
Totally agree. I think adoption is becoming more of an issue and more talked about. And so I like to kind of pick your brain. I actually have two completely different questions. And one is about creativity, which I'll save for a little bit later. And the other one is about, what are some of the most interesting and fascinating use cases you've seen using a no-code platform?
I probably want to approach that question more so use case, definitely, but the different ways organizations have deployed no-code platforms, both from a corporate sense, so a corporate organization, and also a professional service firm sense, legal or otherwise. So we've really seen people who have adopted no-code platforms very, very well, especially in a very large organization, is this concept of creating a COE, a center of excellence. So what they do is when they onboard the platform, they have a special team, or whether if you're in a professional service firm like a support team, or even a profit center, who has been trained. And one of the things about no-code platforms is the upskilling, but also the maintenance of that skill, because we can take you through the upskilling, the education, through the onboarding process. But if you don't use it for a while, you're gonna lose that knowledge, as with anything, right? So what we find really works well in terms of a success story is when they have a team that is using it day in, day out, and they're using it not just for their team, but everywhere within the business that wants a use case built. They come to that team, and that team is the builders, and they would then not just build it for you, but take you through that design, concept, ideation process to take you through the build and apply a certain methodology, whether it's sprints or whatever it is, to help you build out your solution. So I think that's really cool from a success story perspective.
Fascinating. I'm going to ponder that one, because there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to instead, while I think about that, jump to my question about creativity. And this question came to me as you were talking earlier of the different tools in the spectrum, right? And there is this idea in art that constraints foster creativity. By limiting the options that a person has, you actually force them to be more creative in order to solve the problem that's presented to them. So having a super powerful platform that can do everything, it's like giving them a blank canvas. They don't know what to do with it. Instead, if you gave them I don't know, a few lines on the page, they can do a Mr. Squiggles and do something a little bit more interesting. What's your view on that? What's the kind of like right level to offer to people? What do you expose?
I'm actually really glad you asked me that, and it's funny because we didn't prep before, so I wasn't sort of leading you into this direction. So I'm very happy you asked about that, and that's something
We're
that we've been
mind
pondering.
readers. That's what we do here.
It's one of the things we've been pondering for a while. It's what I call the blank canvas problem. And it applies to Neota Logic because we're a platform, and when you open up the platform, you're greeted with an empty page. It's up to you to start building, and we have that problem. And one of the best analogy that I can make to how we solve that problem, or trying to solve that problem, is the building industry. So the building industry, I'm not sure if you or your listeners, viewers know, it has this concept of what they call modular building blocks. So it's this concept of building certain portions of whatever structure you want to build off-site, taking it on-site, and just piecing it together on-site, and then you have your final structure. That's what we're trying to do with this concept of products. So products are pre-built, fully functioning solutions that our customers can use to leverage, and they can leverage it in a few different ways. They can leverage it to just use it straight out of the box, and we have content built into it. It's our content, but they can use it. Or they can swap out the content for their own content. So change the logic around to suit their internal processes, change if it's an NDA solution, use their NDA instead of ours. Or take that built product and then customize it. So build on top of it. Build it out more, or cut some of the stuff down. The point of it is you don't have to start from ground zero. And then on top of that, on top of products, and we also have product templates, which is the product, but with all the content stripped down, so you can start utilizing the template. And then we also have this idea of modular building blocks. So modular building blocks are pre-built, fully functioning solutions that does a specific functionality. And the idea is you can take the building block and products, which are all stored in our library in Neota Logic, download it, and then you can essentially plug and play. So if you wanted an integration in the box and you don't want to build that out yourself, that is one of our building blocks. Download it, you literally plug it in, and I have a sales background, so I treat lightly. And one of my developers will probably, give me some stern words after this. But and I've seen this. It's really as easy as plugging it into your solution and through the Neota Logic authoring platform, and you have an integration with the box. DocuSign as well. You need to do a few things like putting in your own OAuth tokens and stuff like that. But the functionality is built out for you.
What do you think is the biggest hurdle to adoption?
Question without warning. let me have a think about that. If I look at when I came into this industry, a little bit more than 4 years ago, I came from a professional service background, and this was my first foray into no code. Back then, when people used to describe no code, it was, things around the more for less challenge, and do more for less, creating efficiency, automation, and all that sort of stuff. And, those are true, but if you look at some of these conferences that you attend and things like that now, those are still the phrases that's being talked about. More for less, cost centers, profit centers, automation, creating efficiency, reducing time, ROI. And those are really important things to talk about. But if you're talking about the same thing for the same industry, the same technology 4 years down the track. What do you think someone from a buyer side is going to think about that technology? And how do you think that's going to influence their adoption?
Kind of the loss of faith, right? Like people in the industry having heard the same message over and over again, and I think it's more than 4 years. It's probably over a decade or two, and losing faith that, well, if it still hasn't worked, why is it going to work in the future?
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to the soft skills that you were talking about earlier. Like I think that softer side has had a lack of attention and a lack of sort of tender loving care. And maybe that's what we need for the next couple of years.
I think there's so much focus before, of signing a contract, that's the job done. And I think that has reduced adoption from a customer perspective quite a bit. I think you need to start talking about the softer side of things during the sales process, so that either the mindset is reinforced if they already have that mindset, or you're changing that mindset. So when the contract is ultimately signed, they are poised to become a long-term customer. And that is, one of the things that I focused on as a sales manager at Neota, is really adopt that thinking into the sales process. And don't treat it as just a signed contract and your job is done. And I think, I'm not saying we're the only ones who are doing this, but I think to drive adoption, that it needs to start at the beginning of that entire onboarding buying process as well.
Fascinating. Well, Jackson, I've learned so much. I feel like I've just followed Hansel and Gretel through the forest, following those breadcrumbs, and found a gingerbread house, but there's no witch in the story. And I just felt like, yeah, it's a little treasure trove of nuggets of gold and gingerbread. So thank you so much for your time in your chat today. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you did as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.